I'll tell you what, different generations don't handle TV the same. I just watched, my friend told me about that show Severed, and that thing, you know, I'm watching it on my phone with my earpods because that's what you do now. And it was too intense. It's like a full-time job. I don't even want to get into that. But now my parents, you go there, that's a different story. My mom always has the TV on. And she's always telling me, like, I'll go over there and in a room that no one's in, big giant TVs on with the Golden Girls or something. Some show is on. And I say, you watch this all day? She goes, no, it just comes on. What do you mean? What do you mean it comes on? I don't have things in my house where it just shows come on. For her, it's always there. So if things come on, it could be the craziest stuff. It could be some weird news channel. It could be like the weather. It could be the weather channel. It could be some sitcom she's never even seen before. And you say, oh, Ma, you watch this? No, those things just come on. Just comes on. Steve Weiner here from GetRubix.com. And today we're going to take a look at a kind of a custom solution for helping you decide what kind of Windows 365 Cloud PCs you need based on the physical machines you have. Well, you'll see. Could be anything. My mom could have Scarface playing 24/7 on the family TV. Oh, it just came on.
GetRubix, solving for the modern workplace.
So recently I was working with a customer and they were transitioning a good bit of their physical PCs to Windows 365 Cloud PCs, which is great. You know me, I love Cloud PCs. But the problem became, you know, what do they buy? When you're looking here at the SKUs, you know, obviously you have all different things in terms of the CPU cores. You could choose memory. Depending on the cores, you have different memory. Some of them have different options. So how do you really know what to buy based on what you have? So what I ended up doing was I created a PowerShell script and was able to produce a report like this. So if you take a look at this, we are looking at, can I make this any bigger? Yes, I can. So we're looking at the name of the device, the primary user, so you know whose device it is. And you can see the RAM and the storage they currently have. And then the script will recommend a SKU based on that. So you could see, for example, this guy has 8 gigs of RAM, 60 gigs of storage. So we had to go to the 128 tier, right? Which can be done with the 2 virtual CPUs. In this case, we had a much beefier machine. We had 16 gigs of RAM, right? And 256 gigs of storage. So we had a bump to the 4-core machine. And then this one was so big, let's see, 64 gigs and a terabyte of storage. So that would need something custom. Let's talk about how we did it. Now in my demo lab, we don't have a lot of devices. So, you know, if you're looking at 7, 8 devices, sure, that's something you can just look at and say, oh, okay, I'm going to go pick out Cloud PCs. But you got to remember, some of these customers have hundreds, if not thousands upon thousands of workstations. So when you say, hey, we're going to replace 4,000 physical PCs with Cloud PCs, you can't sit there and look at the specs all day. So, you know, that's why we built what we built here. Okay, so I'm going to start by just making a new, we're just going to make a new PowerShell script right here on the desktop. And we're going to call it physical to Cloud PC .ps1. I could probably think of a cooler name, but I don't really care that much. Let's open this with code. All right, so there's a few different ways you can do this, right? If you want to just run this automatically, you would go ahead and build something maybe with application client and secret. That would be very easy to do. In this case, we're just going to run this ourselves. We're going to do a combination of the actual graph module, but we're going to be invoking our own requests because of the way we have to get the data here. So let's check for the module. So the module we need is going to be get module lists available, Microsoft Graph, Intune. I think I forgot the name parameter. You might not need that. Intune, and then we're going to do error action, silently continue. So we're going to say if not module, meaning if it's not there, we're going to install module name Microsoft Graph Intune force. You could do a confirm false if you want. we should be all set there. All right, so now that that's there, let's go ahead and connect the graph, connect MG graph. We can be very specific about our scopes. We are going to do device read all and user read all. Cool. So that'll prompt you if you're not signed in. If you are already signed in, you have a token cache, it'll just let you in, but you'll basically sign in with your credentials. Your Intune credentials are fine, whatever you use for that. All right, so now let's set a few variables. So the device endpoint, which is the graph endpoint, is https graph.microsoft.com/beta/device management/managed devices. So that takes us to all devices. So now to get that, we specifically want our Windows devices. So we can even make some, I forgot to make some comments here. Let's do that now. So let's install the Intune module. It helps you later when you have to go back and fix things. Connect to graph. Endpoint. This is the Intune device endpoint. And now we're going to get Windows devices. So Windows devices, we can call that Windows devices, will be equal to, we're going to do an invoke mg graph request. The method is a get. The URI is our device endpoint, but we have to actually run a filter on it. So because it's a filter, we're not just going to put an endpoint. So we are going to do, in quotes, we're going to do our dollar and then parentheses dollar. We're going to do device endpoint question mark. We have to do a little backtick dollar for filter equals operating system EQ to Windows in single quotes. I often get asked about this, why I do this sometimes. I do it probably more than I need to, but the whole point of putting the variable in a $ parentheses is so that, if something is next to it, like a colon or a question mark, or sometimes characters can mess up variables. So that's where you're going to want to do that. So I can put a question mark right next to it and not have a problem. All right, so those are all our Windows devices. Now what we're going to do is we're going to call this SKU mapping. This is going to be Windows 365 SKUs. So we're basically going to come up with our SKU and then give it parameters. So I'm going to build this around the 2, 4, and the 8 core. So we're going to do a 2 core with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage. Then I'll do another 2 core with 8 gigs and 128 gigs of storage. Then we will do a 4 core with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. And then I'm going to do the 8 core, 32 gigs of RAM, 512 gigs of storage. Right? Now you can put in as many as you want, and I'll show you how to do that here. So we're going to do 2 virtual CPU, 4 gigs, 64 gigs storage. We could even call that 4 gigs RAM, 64 gig SSD. And that will be equal to, now our parameters are going to be the RAM is going to be equal to 4. And the storage is going to be equal to 64. So those are going to be our parameters. And I'm just going to copy this 3 more times. Okay, so those are my SKUs. And notice I'm only looking at RAM and storage because that's really the only thing that's going to affect my decision here. I couldn't get the rate CPU object I would want from Intune for that to matter, but as I looked at the SKUs, it didn't really seem to matter. My decisions fell more in line with RAM and SSD, as I imagine most of you will be the same. So, you can add more than this, but I just left it at this. So now, basically, I have an object where if I pass these parameters into it, I can align, I can land on a SKU, right? And how do we do that? This is a function So we're going to call this the SKU function. You can name it something else. So this function will be called get Windows 365 SKU. All right, so it's going to take two parameters. It's going to take RAM and it's going to take storage. So I want to sort these SKUs based on the RAM attribute and the storage attribute. So what that means is when I pass these through here, let's scroll down a little bit. I'll show you. For each SKU in sorted SKUs, my specs, or what I'm going to pass through, are going to be equal to SKU dot value. So now I just have to say if the RAM, which is what I'm passing in from my Intune machines, is less than the specs dot RAM of that machine, and the storage is less than the specs, the storage specs, we're going to say return SKU dot key, and that's going to be the string part, which is the front. So really what's happening here is I'm sorting by their values, and I'm saying if the parameters I pass through, they have to be less on both sides. So if I had 8 gigs of RAM, right, and 64 gigs of storage, it's going to bump me up to the 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage. If I had 4 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, it's going to bump me up to this guy right here, right? So it basically, I have to fit on both sides. So I got to find out which cloud PCs will support my RAM and my storage on the physical PCs I pass through. Okay, and then before we exit the function, we're going to put this return custom SKU required. So basically, if it doesn't fall into any of those, we'll just come back with say, hey, you're going to need a custom SKU. All right, so now we're going to build the device report. So build device report. Let's scroll down, give ourselves some more room here. For each device in devices. Now, the thing to remember about our devices, oh wait, what did I call that? I called that Windows devices. Remember that we had to do a filter there, filter the operating system for Windows. So anytime you do a filter, you have to do one of two things. I could either do .value, right, to pull out the attributes inside, because it's going to come back with one object. Or, let me just put those there so it kind of shuts up. Or I could not do that and put this guy inside parentheses. So we can do parentheses dot value. So I can either do dot value up here or down below. I usually like to do it up here. Doesn't really matter. I just like talking through that. All right, so for each device in Windows devices, let's get some attributes. So we need the device ID. We need the name. So device name equals device dot device name. And we want the primary user. If there's anything else you want to collect, like in another version, I had the OS version, but that didn't really matter so much. User, principal, name. So you just do what it is you want in there. Okay, so this part's a little tricky. So now we got to get the hardware details. So get RAM and storage details. So these are a little different, right? So first thing is, what is our main endpoint for that? So we're going to call that the hardware URI. And the hardware URI, very simply, is the device endpoint, which we know is this graph endpoint. So device management, manage devices, forward slash device ID. So that will take us to that device. Now, the information we need is in two different places. So the storage details, we're going to call this storage details, are in invoke mg graph request. Method is get. URI is the hardware URI. So device management, manage devices / device ID. But now what we got to do is question backtick $select equals hardware information. All right, so that's where there's basically a set of data that the the storage lives in. Now the memory is really a pain for whatever reason. So let's do memory details. That's in a much more specific place. So invoke mg graph request method get URI hardware URI, same thing, question backtick $select hardware information, comma, physical memory in bytes. So we're gonna have to do, nope, I said butts. We're gonna have to do some math in there to figure out the gigabytes for both of them. So let's do that now. So storage is going to be equal to our storage details dot hardware information dot total storage space divided by 1 gigabyte. Same thing with the RAM. So the RAM is going to be memory details dot physical memory in bytes / 1 gigabyte. All right. And now we'll determine our recommended SKU. So we're going to type in recommended SKU is going to be our function. Because remember, the function returns either the SKU key or custom SKU required. So recommended SKU is equal to get Windows 365 SKU. RAM is RAM. Storage is storage. Now that we have all that, actually, let me add a thing here. Pass in parameters to get recommended SKU. Now we're just going to add the device to the report because we have all the information. So the device report is going to plus equal to add something. And this is going to be a custom PS object. So PS custom object. So name and value is all we need to build this. So let's do it this way. It'll be device name is equal to device name. Primary, not primary. Primary user is equal to primary user. We're going to do the RAM is equal to, now we have to do some stuff with the RAM. So we're going to do math round to 2 digits. So we're going to do RAM 2. Same thing with the storage to keep it clean. Math round storage 2. And then the recommended SKU is going to be equal to the recommended SKU. And now at the end, we just display the report. Display the report. So device report, format, table, auto size is what I did. All right, so let's take everything here and let's run it. I was already logged into the graph, so it didn't prompt me. Take a look at this, what it piped out. So I have some machines that I don't think are in there anymore, but they came back and they have 0. So we could always filter that out later. But if you look at this, it's giving us its recommendations. So in this case, so we had a machine with 16 gigs of RAM. Most of them are the 2-core 4 gigs or 2-core 8 gigs. In this case, it recommended 4-core 16 gigs for this machine. So it's definitely doing its job, right? It's reading based on what we have here. And then this guy, which is, biggest machine, 64 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage, it just came back custom SKU required. However, if I did want to change that and say, let's see here, 64, there's 64,000, 64, let's see, 64 and 1 terabyte. So I could actually put that SKU in if I wanted to. Let's see, and it would give me that. So let's go back to the script for a moment. Let's copy this line and change a few things on it. So it would be 16 cores, 64, 1 terabyte, and the RAM is 64, and the storage is, we'll say, 1,000. even though it's 1024. Let's run this again. See if we get a better, that's not better, a different result. Yep, take a look. So what was a custom SKU required actually came back and read correctly. And you can do other things too if you want to put the prices in of all of them, because remember, you're deciding what's in your SKU list. So if you want to, you know, add pricing in there, maybe you even want to export it, right? So I could say the device report, which is the output, I could say device report, export CSV, path, C temp, W365 report.csv. Yeah, so check that out. It's pretty cool. And then I can, now sort the data, organize it, present it to someone, and basically say, here's all the SKUs we're going to need based on what's inside of Intune. So I've encountered this multiple times already. And usually when I encounter something more than once, it seems to be a trend or something you folks are struggling with. As far as moving to Windows 365 and transitioning, right? You're probably not going to transition your whole fleet, but at least for the machines you are, maybe you can group those users and just assign the script to those, or, you know, figure out different ways to do it. It's a, you know, there's a lot of room here. So that's the core script, and I'm going to put a link below in my GitHub. You can grab it. And I'd be curious to see what modifications you folks make with it, because, you know, it, you know, has a lot of uses in terms of kind of crawling through and reporting something based on device attributes. So either way, whether you're using Windows 365 or not, hopefully it was helpful in terms of just PowerShell into know-how. And we'll be seeing you.